Yo, what's good, you guys? Your boy Ben Mahari here, represent Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Hope y'all been doing good, man. Hope y'all been having a good summer for the most part, and hope y'all been staying healthy and staying away from all this crazy stuff that's been going on with the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? Um, I wanted to particularly talk about, this interview with Kevin Durant and Draymond Green they had on Bleacher Report. I have to say that I didn't expect this coming, but after watching the full interview from start to finish, I'm very, very happy that these guys did it. And the reason that is that I, the thing that really intrigued me about the interview was that how open these guys were. In terms of the questions that they were asking. How intellectually, superior these guys were. I mean, these guys really did an excellent job of just explaining things in a very detailed manner, so the viewers could understand what really, really transpired between those two guys and within their time in Golden State. The one thing that I really took from this interview is several things. My perspective on Draymond Green has changed to a certain degree. And a lot of you guys have known that I'm not the biggest fan of Draymond Green. I've made my statements clear publicly and privately many times before about how I can't stand Draymond Green because of his antics and the fact that he lets his emotions get the better of him. Having said that, a lot of my things about Draymond have changed. The man is a lot more brighter than people tend to give him credit for, and the way that he was and the questions that he was asking, I mean, it felt like he was a top notch journalist by the way he was talking to Kevin Durant. Like the guy knew the question that needed to be asked. A lot of the things that the public wanted to know about these between these two guys, and I felt that a lot of the questions were finally answered, particularly the whole incident in Los Angeles back in the 2018-19 season. The incident where Draymond Green cursed out at Kevin Durant on the sideline after Draymond Green refused to give Kevin Durant the ball in the final seconds of regulation in a game against the Clippers. Now, the way I look at it simply is this: do I think that that Draymond Green should have handled himself a little bit better in the aftermath? I do so. I still agree with that. But after hearing what they were talking about, I felt that the Warriors organization really blew things out of proportion in this respect. Both of these guys had their way of communicating and squashing their beef with one another, and if both of them felt like it wasn't a big deal, that you just got to take what they're saying here. But the guys in the Warriors organization, the general manager and the head coach, you guys know who they are. Try to really enforce Draymond Green and Kevin Durant to try to hash their beef in front of them. And it felt like they were trying to force the apology down their throats, and it kind of just rubbed them off the wrong way. And it's like, dude, if we have a beef with one another, and we have a decision, we have the time to make it up with one another at any given time, you have to let the two parties that got into that beef, settle it with one another. You can't just force the two people to just settle it right then and there, because then either it's not genuine or it's just being forced for the sake of being forced, so that the other people around the whole situation feels like that, okay, that beef is settled, we can finally move on from this. Nah, man. Like, I really felt and understood why that Kevin Durant felt the way he felt. And the other thing too that I took from it is that I think Kevin Durant really didn't feel Steve Kerr as well. Not to try to disrespect him as a man or anything like that, but more in the lines of the fact that sometimes there's certain things about Steve Kerr that he really didn't respect about him a bit. Not as in terms of basketball per se, but more just on the lines of this guy lets people run over him sometimes, and that kind of thing. And so I really think that these two guys. Listen, if they had a let's break something very clear here. If those two really had a legitimate beef, then they wouldn't be even so associating themselves together in the whole Olympics throughout the whole entire time in Tokyo. All right, that should have let you know that those guys, they didn't really have a beef with one another. It was just a misunderstanding that was kind of blown out of proportion, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that sometimes that the media plays a major role of blowing things out of proportion when it doesn't tend to be, right? And I felt like the Warriors organization, overplayed their hand in trying to, squash out the beef between those two guys. Like, let them decide what they want to do with it. And if they feel like, listen, we're on good terms, it's all in the past, like, we don't need to talk about this anymore. But if it just felt like they were trying to force something that it wasn't necessary. And when Draymond Green was kind of laughed it off at the general manager, basically saying like, you know that we don't what I want to say, right? And kind of just laughed it off because they were trying to make Draymond Green apologize to Kevin Durant for. It's just like I get where Draymond Green was coming from. The fact that listen, we have our argument. We just had our beef, but listen, there's nothing physically wrong between the two of us, and so you guys are blowing this out of proportion, and you guys are going to be responsible for the breakup of this team. And remember, Kevin Durant was going to be a free agent at the end of that year, and he was bound to leave no matter what. And he wanted to achieve winning 3 straight championships. Unfortunately, the injuries got in the way of achieving that goal. But the thing that really, irritated about this whole thing was just the whole mass media response after this, because I wanted to really get the vibe of how both Fox Sports and both ESPN took it. Fox Sports and Undisputed, they try to still put the same blame on Draymond Green. And, with first take, I felt like they were playing both sides of the fence, but leaning towards one way of, putting some blame on Draymond and then putting some blame on Steph Curry. Like, really, what does Steph Curry have anything to do with this? You know what I mean? So I just didn't, I really want to get the vibes out of everything. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is this, you know, we cannot always assume that a lot of the things we see on the court is not actually what we see in real life. We don't know a lot of the stuff that goes on in the locker rooms and at any professional level. All right, if if we have an incident with one another, and we pretty much find it out and stuff like that, but then you go and then basically days later we hash it out and we move on from it, then just leave it at that. And so I really felt that this interview really did a great job. In fact, I think it's one of the best interviews in the last few years. Dating back to the Isaiah Thomas, Magic Johnson interview, the Kobe and Shaq interview. You know what I'm saying? And all these great interviews that allow the athletes to really speak their story and really get to the bottom of this without a reporter, trying to navigate the whole thing, with trying to make it more of a tabloid type of situation. I just felt like these questions that Draymond Green was asking, and a lot of the answers that Kevin Durant was, unleashing, and also what Draymond Green was saying, really hit home with a lot of the different points about what we wanted to know about those two guys. So I think we can pretty much consider that this beef was never a beef in the first place. It was just a bit of a misunderstanding, and I think Kevin Durant could have done a better job in terms of telling the team, "Listen, I'm going to leave at the end of the year," because that has a lot to do with what was going on with the madness of that whole year. Because remember, KD was leaving as a free agent, but the guys who've been there together since the days of where they were drafted, Draymond, Curry and Thompson, they were all looking like Kevin. Like, you just got to make up your mind. Like, if you are, just let us know if you're going to leave as a free agent. And I think Kevin Durant should have done a better job in terms of explaining that to the team. But at the end of the day, I think that the whole misunderstanding between the two guys was blown out of proportion, and the Warriors organization does hold major accountability. I'm not going to say some; they hold major accountability, because that team was a beautiful juggernaut, and all those guys played their roles to a T, and they were successful. All right, but at the end of the day, they could have won at least five championships if they wanted to. You know, if going back to 2015, and then blowing it in 2016, and then winning in 2017 and 2018. 3 championships in 5 years. That's a really successful, dynasty, if you want to put it. But they could have won five if they were very serious. They could have won six if they wanted to keep it going. But at the end of the day, these guys won their championships. Katie's got two. Draymond, Steph Curry, and Clay, they got three. So it's not really much of a failure at all. All these guys, including Draymond, they're going to be featured in the Hall of Fame one day. And so I think that I think that the whole thing was just a misunderstanding that was kind of blown out of proportion, and it comes down to that the organization tried to mask it and tried to force something that wasn't necessary at all, and at the expense, it pretty much costed them a super team that was really was really at their top of their game, and could have been even one of the greatest teams in NBA history. So, but it is what it is, though, man. I really appreciated the interview. It was really well put out, and honestly, I think we're going to see more of these interviews down the line as we continue on in this new generation of media. Players, finally deciding, listen, we're not going to let a lot of the mass media and the old media, control our narrative. We're going to control our narrative and give you guys our stories, and we're not going to let anyone else dictate how we speak our stories. So I really appreciate the interview. It was really well done. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know what your thoughts about the whole interview. And with that, I'm out. Peace.